All right, Browns fans, let's talk for a minute, because something interesting just happened, and it could have a real impact on this team. If you've been paying attention to what the front office is doing lately, you probably noticed they're clearly trying to fix some of the biggest problems from last season. And honestly, this latest move is one that might say a lot about where the team believes things went wrong. So stick with me for a moment, because once you look a little deeper at what's going on, this situation becomes even more interesting than it first appears. I'll tell you everything in detail, but first, make sure to click the like button and subscribe to stay well informed. Go Browns! The Browns made a move that immediately tells you where this front office believes the biggest problem was, and they did not waste time attacking it. Cleveland is bringing in Elton Jenkins on a 2-year, $24 million deal after his release from Green Bay, with $20 million guaranteed. And that is the kind of move that puts the spotlight directly on the offensive line going into next season. According to the information in the file, the Browns had explored a trade for him before he was released, then stayed patient and landed him outright, while Baltimore was also involved. That matters, because this was not just about adding a veteran lineman. It was also about beating a division rival to a player both teams could use. And from a Browns perspective, the logic is easy to understand. Cleveland did not want to head into next year relying on Luke Whippler as the starting center, and that appears to be a major reason why this signing feels important. Jenkins played virtually all of his snaps at center last season, and while he has also shown value as a guard during his career, the expectation here is clear. He should step in as the Browns' starting center. That experience matters for a team trying to stabilize a line that had too many issues, too many injuries, and too much inconsistency. This is not being presented as a perfect signing, and that is important to say. The file makes it clear that last year was not his best season. He allowed 2 sacks, had 4 penalties, and posted a 72.5 pass-blocking grade, which suggests he still held up fairly well in protection even if the overall year was not dominant. So, this is not a move built on the idea that Cleveland just landed an elite star in his absolute prime. This is a move built on the idea that the Browns needed a proven, versatile, experienced offensive lineman who can help right now without crushing the budget. At $12 million per year, the deal is framed as much more manageable than the very top of the market. What makes this even more interesting is the bigger picture. The Browns are not making one isolated move here. They are building an entire plan for the offensive line. The file outlines a full wave of additions and changes. Titus Howard arrived through a trade, Zion Johnson signed a 3-year, $49.5 million deal, and Kevin Jenkins was re-signed. That means Cleveland has already made 4 offensive line moves this offseason, and that tells you this organization clearly viewed the trenches as the top priority. It also suggests the Browns are trying to create flexibility, because several of these players have experience at multiple spots. Jenkins fits that approach perfectly. There is also a coaching angle here that should not be ignored. The file mentions new offensive line coach George Warhop and the idea that Cleveland is trying to put the right pieces in the right spots. That could end up being one of the biggest themes of the offseason. This line may not be full of perfect answers, but the Browns appear determined to become more reliable, more durable, and deeper than they were a year ago. Zion Johnson played every snap for the Chargers last season, and that durability stood out in the report as something Cleveland valued. Jenkins brings veteran experience. Howard brings versatility. Kevin Jenkins is another player the team believes can still develop. When you connect all of that, you can see the strategy taking shape. Now, there is still an important concern attached to Elton Jenkins. The file states that he was released after failing his physical, tied to a lower leg fracture. So while the Browns clearly believe he can fill a major need, there is still a real question about whether he can get back to his best form. He is also 30 years old, which means this is not being sold as a long-term answer for the future. It is more of a win-now solution for a team trying to stop the bleeding up front and become competitive again in the trenches. And that may be the key point for Browns fans. This signing does not mean Cleveland is done investing in the line. The file is very clear that the Browns are still expected to draft offensive linemen, with the idea that some rookies could eventually start while others develop behind experienced veterans. So this move should be seen as part of a larger rebuild of the offensive front, not the final piece. There is still a hole at left tackle, and that remains one of the biggest questions on the roster. But by addressing center and adding multiple bodies with starting experience, Cleveland is at least showing a serious effort to fix its biggest weakness before the season begins. So the debate now becomes simple for Browns fans. Was Elgton Jenkins the smart, stabilizing move this line needed? Or are you still not fully convinced until Cleveland finds the right answer at left tackle and proves this new-look group can hold up? When you look deeper into what Cleveland is doing, the signing of Elgton Jenkins starts to make even more sense because of the direction the entire offensive line appears to be heading. This is not just about plugging one hole. It looks like a full reset in philosophy. The Browns clearly want a unit that is more flexible, more durable, and capable of adjusting during the season if injuries hit again. Over the past year, that line struggled to stay healthy and struggled to stay consistent. And that is exactly the kind of situation front offices try to fix aggressively in the offseason. Jenkins fits that model because of his versatility. Even though the expectation is that he will step in at center, his history of playing guard gives Cleveland options if injuries force changes later in the year. Coaches love players like that, especially when the roster already includes other linemen who can move around the formation. When you combine Jenkins with additions like Titus Howard and Zion Johnson, what you start to see is a line that can shift pieces without completely collapsing if one player goes down. Another important factor here is leadership. Veteran offensive linemen often bring more value than what you see on the stat sheet. Communication on the line is critical, especially at the center position, and having someone who has played in big games and high-pressure situations can help settle the entire unit. Jenkins spent years in Green Bay playing meaningful football, and that experience could matter a lot in a locker room that is trying to reset its identity in the trenches. At the same time, the risk element cannot be ignored. The injury that led to his release is something the Browns' medical staff clearly evaluated very carefully. If Jenkins returns healthy and performs close to the level he showed earlier in his career, this contract could end up looking like a very smart value signing. But if the injury continues to affect him, Cleveland may still find itself searching for answers along the interior of the line. That is why the front office seems determined to continue building depth rather than relying on just one move. The draft will likely be another key part of this plan. Cleveland appears ready to add young linemen who can develop behind these veterans. That kind of approach creates competition, and competition often raises the overall performance of the entire group. A rookie might not start immediately, but having that pipeline of young talent keeps the line from aging all at once. There is also the bigger picture of how this affects the entire offense. When the offensive line plays well, everything becomes easier. The running game finds space, the quarterback has more time in the pocket, and the playbook opens up. When the line struggles, the offense becomes predictable and limited. The Browns clearly understand that if they want to compete in the AFC, it starts up front. And remember, this division is brutal when it comes to defensive fronts. Teams like Baltimore and Pittsburgh are known for attacking quarterbacks and disrupting offenses with aggressive pass rushers. If Cleveland wants to survive those matchups, the offensive line has to be able to hold its ground. Moves like this suggest the Browns are preparing specifically for those battles inside the division. So as the offseason continues, The offensive line will remain one of the most fascinating storylines for this team. We are seeing the early stages of what could become a completely reshaped unit by the time the season begins. Some of these players will need to prove they can stay healthy. Others will need to prove they can live up to their contracts. And younger players will try to fight their way into the rotation. But one thing is clear. The Browns are not ignoring the problem anymore. They are attacking it head-on, investing resources, and trying to rebuild the foundation of the offense piece by piece. If this plan works, Cleveland could enter the season with a line that looks very different from the one fans watched struggle last year. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think Elton Jenkins can become the stabilizing presence this offensive line needs? Or do you still believe the Browns must make another major move before the season begins? And if you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like on the video, and click on the video appearing on your screen right now. Because the latest Browns news and updates you want to hear first will always be right here on the channel. Go Browns!